Hello, everyone. So I was at an event in Lyon last year, and I bumped into Delphine, who said that she was a pitch and pitch deck coach. I know lots of
No,
people need help,
need help.
want help on pitch decks, and so I thought that's fantastic. We should do an event together. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Delphine, and then I will tell you my pitch story and then hand over to Delphine.
Great. Hello, Anthony. Nice to be with you. A happy new year to everyone.
All right. Do you want to tell us a bit about your background?
Oh, sorry. So very happy to be with you. So I've been working in communications for over than 15 years now, and I've been helping people and companies for more than 4 years, growing up and scaling up in communications on an international basis, and also in pitching for fundraisings. So I'm here actually combining my two passions: communications, pitching, storytelling, and international. So very happy to be here.
All right, fantastic. So the particular theme for today is actually dealing with international investors. If you're in France and looking for UK or US investors, or you're in the UK and looking for French or US or other investors, there'll be a particular focus on that. So I'll start on my side. Hello, I'm Anthony. I'm founder and CEO at Seed Legals. There are many thousands of companies on Seed Legals. I see many pitches and I see many pitch decks. And one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is when people pitch, they're often saying what they do rather than why anyone wants it. And, they're often pitch events, and people do these 3 or 5 minute pitches. And at the end of the pitch, you're thinking, I've no idea what they actually do, which is a disaster. And I wonder if someone asked people in the room, do you remember what they do? And I think one of the problems is people explain essentially how clever they are at the stuff they're building, but ultimately nobody cares what you're building. They only care about whether it solves a problem for them. And this is something I learned early on in the days of Seed Legals, where our website had said we do document generation and content automation. And then I realized nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, today I'm looking for document automation. They go, no, I want to do a funding round. I want to hire somebody. So I redid everything to downplay the stuff that we do and put insane amounts of time into, and only focus on the problem you solve. So for me, the key point before I hand over to Delphine is that when I see a pitch deck, and in fact a pitch, there are the problem is there's just page after page of stuff you do. What I love to see in a pitch deck is, even though a pitch deck is aimed at an investor, as the investor, I'm picturing if you can sell to me in the same way you sell to your target audience, then I know that you're going to be investable. So even though the pitch deck is for the investor, if it's almost the first few pages are written as if they're an audience member, this is insane. It needs to change. Here's our solution. And then I go, well, your audience is going to understand it. That means your business will grow. That means I should invest in you. And then the rest of the pitch deck proceeds to be more of the investor side of things. But without further ado from me, we're going to cover in the session the pitch deck, pitching on a Zoom call, pitching in person. And then please post your questions in the chat. We'll pick those up occasionally. On this session, I'm going to play the part of the well-meaning but naive founder, and Delphine is the expert. Of course, I hopefully have a bit of expertise in the space as well, so I may hop in with some thoughts too. Sure. All right, Delphine, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. So you should be able, I guess, to see my screen, everyone. Just want to share that. Okay, so again, so there you go. Up. There you go. So very happy to be here. And actually, so as you've started, Anthony, you said you like making your research on on the audience, and that's actually something we have in common, because I'm going to go into that as well. So here we're going to talk about how to pitch and how you master your pitch in different cultural environments. But you need to take into account there are some common bases. And because I'm French, I'm going to speak about cooking and let's start with an example of, well, if you take a dish, sometimes you have a basic, a same dish that is international, but you will adapt it with different spices or different ingredients, but you keep the basis. Well, that's about the same thing in a way for pitch, in a way that there are some common rules, but you will inject some different elements depending on where you are or who you pitch. And as you will adapt your dish depending on the person tasting what you've cooked, well, that's about the same thing in your pitch. You will adapt your pitch depending on who is listening to you. And so that's actually my first point, and one of the most important one, which is, well, make your research, do your research. Who are you talking to? I've seen too many pitches where, the speaker was passionate, he mastered the information very well, but he actually didn't make it, because it's not just, pitching international in an international context, not just about translating words, or it's about translating emotions and intentions, and also taking into account the needs and expectations, which can be different according to the audience you're talking to. So maybe a German group of investors will be more picky on details than a Brazilian audience, which will be more looking for the interpersonal connections. So I do insist on that. Before you start to pitch, make some research on who you're talking to. And again, I'd like to take an example of an American company doing a tech application for project management. And the company is very well known in the US, and they want to expand in Japan. So they arrive in Japan and they go and present very straightforward how the app is great, the features, the technical excellence of it. And they had a very American way of presenting it with a very product characteristic and so on. But what they didn't take into account is the way Japanese relate to business. And what is important for them is also this building personal relations and trust with the person you're talking to before actually talking business. So during the American presentation, well, the Japanese audience was a bit puzzled or embarrassed by the presentation, because it was too straightforward for them, and they couldn't actually see the American company as a potential business partner, because they couldn't relate to them, they couldn't connect to them. So in the end, the American company actually didn't make it in Japan, and they missed an important market opportunity because they actually didn't try to understand how the Japanese culture works and how to adapt to the Japanese people they were talking to. So I do insist on investing some time to do some research about the cultural references, the way you behave, the hobbies, the religion, the behaviors and so on. That's very important. So I do insist on this point.
So Thank you for that, Delphine. Now, while you change your presentation, we're looking at your presentation mode rather than presenter mode. So if you can fix that while I talk about understanding your audience. And so, by the way, my anecdote is years ago, I used to do some trips to Japan, presented to Japanese people, and I thought the meeting was going terribly because nobody agreed to anything. It was a disaster. And then I was told, actually, Japanese don't commit to anything in the meeting. They will tell you later when they've gone in a huddle themselves what's been agreed. And lo and behold, magically, later on in the day, people came by and said, yes, we have agreed to the proposals. Like, oh, wow, that was amazing. But, one of the key takeaway points is, even if you're not presenting to somebody really foreign, it's important to know that you've only got one pitch deck. You're not going to make a different pitch deck for each investor, but what you should do is work on your pitch to be individual to that investor. So understand, when I get on an investor meeting, I start by asking them, tell me about the companies you like, your investment focus. What size rounds do you do? Are you a follower? Are you a lead investor? And then you know what to pitch. If it's an angel investor, look at their LinkedIn profile, look at their tweets, and see what turns them on. Because actually, investors are turned on by a variety of different things. Some of them are the spreadsheet guru. They want to see your business plan. For others, they're not really interested in that. Like, yes, it's got to make a return on investment, but we really are interested in it's going to save the planet. Or I want to have bragging rights that I'm first money into this business, or that I just want my SEIS or EIS if I'm a UK investor. So work out what's going to turn on the investor. Ask them a few questions first so it becomes interactive rather than just talking at them. And then you can work on teasing out from your pitch those things that are important to them. And then they'll see something that's personalized to them, even though you've just got one deck. All right. Back to you, Delphine. Thank you.
Now that can you see? Is my?
We can.
Yeah.
We can
Okay.
indeed.
Great. Yeah. Totally agree with you. And so connecting and making your research very important. But my second point is, how do you connect actually to your audience, despite the research you've made, is actually finding the right balance between the logos and pathos, so the rational and the emotional. It's again a general rule for any kind of pitch, but it's just the way you will balance it depending on who you're talking to that will change. So some cultures will be more likely to go more to the rational and some others to the pathos. So you will need to find the right, the right balance. So I don't want to go into too many stereotypes, but still, if you go to the US or the Western cultures, Germany, that will be more based on facts and figures, rational elements, proof points. So will be more on the logos side. While if you go rather to Asia, well, as I mentioned in my previous example, you will tend to take more time to deal with the personal connections and build some relations, find some positive emotions, and build some trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. So I guess, for example, if you're pitching a German person, a German investor, well, they will like the reliability, the efficiency, the proof points, and very concrete facts. I'm not saying that the emotion shouldn't be there. Again, it's a question of balance. It's just the emotion in this case can be introduced in a more subtle way. It can be in the passion you have in the innovation put in your application, or the positive impact of your solution on society, for example. But if you go pitching to an investor with a more pathos aspect, then passion and relation will be more at the heart of your pitch. I'm not saying facts and figures on this side aren't important, but what will make the difference will be your ability to connect and to tell a story that actually resonates, echoes with the values of your audience. So this is where you will know if you find the right balance. It is where you know where if your story actually works or doesn't work. And that takes me to my actually third point about stories. Because again, I'm saying there are some general rules, and stories is part of these rules. I'm sure you all read books, you go to the cinema, you watch series, whatever. So we all like stories. And this is where you need to strengthen, to build your pitch around a strong storytelling. And there is a common, what we call a narrative arc or narrative structure that you can respect, and that will be quite easy to apply for any kind of pitch, although you will localize it within your deck later on. But usually, to be efficient, a story respects the same narrative structure. So it's built on this arc. So basically, there's a starting point. I'm going to take an example. So let's say if we have an example of air traveling sector, and it's chaotic and predictable. And this is what our heroine, let's say, called Mary, she observed there's a big problem in this air industry. So she really wants to improve the user experience. That's the starting point. And then, well, she notices that there's lots of cancellations, lots of delays. And this is where Mary has the idea of an application to optimize air travel. Let's say it's called Skyflow, whatever. So this is what triggers the call for adventure, what triggers the starting point of the creation of a solution. So she works on the solution, and this is what she's going to show in the pitch deck as well. And then that gets more complicated. So it's a rising action with the quest and complication. She plunges deep into the development of the app that would synchronize in real time, maybe the data of the different airlines companies, matching the passengers' expectations. But the industry is very skeptical. So this is where Mary needs to show when pitching that her innovation is actually working, and that she can bring, that she can show the value proposition and what the added value she can bring thanks to the solution. And then she had this solution despite the examples, and she starts to attract some attention of some investors and clients. So this is where you will show the traction, and that will tend to reassure your potential investors. And maybe Mary will sign a key partnership with an airline industry. So she will start to show that some visibility, some potential on the market. And this is the climax. This is where Mary actually has started to overcome the difficulties. And then that goes better, and the application has become a must-have for the air travel industry. Mary becomes the CEO of a startup with a real vision, a roadmap of development. She's stronger now, and she's actually ready to grow. So when you will start and build your pitch, you need to take these elements into account. So start with the problem, with the pain, the chaos of the airline industry, but that will be your pain. What kind of problem do you want to solve? And why there an opportunity why there a market, an opportunity, possibility to develop something new to solve actually this problem, and how you're going to do it. What does the application do? What does your service do? How much does it answer this pain? So the pain needs to be very clear, because as the clearer it is, the most relevant your solution will be. And show very briefly, you don't need to take hours, especially if you have 10 minutes, a 10-minute pitch, to show how relevant it is, how it works, and how it has already, attracted the attention of some customers. And also an investor needs to understand to project himself. And so where do you want to take him or her with the service application? What is your roadmap? Where do you want to be in 4 years, 5 years, so that we can project and see that you have a real vision. And this is where we're going to understand as well why you need some money, because in the end, the pitch deck is also to ask for some money. So if we've understood very clearly what is the problem, what your solution is solving, and where you want to go, and why you need money to support the development of this solution, that will make sense for your audience. So that's a very general structure that you can apply. It's kind of universal. My point is also here, depending on where you pitch, that you need to localize your story. If I take my example of Mary and the applications she's developing, maybe she will take the example of a waiting room, an overcrowded waiting room in an airport in New York, which will be different from a waiting room in an airport in Tokyo. And also, she will probably adapt the solution depending on the market shares. So let's say she will adapt the solution with ground transportation in Japan, while in the US, you have little choice than air travel. So again, she will localize the way she adapts the solution and how she pitches. And data is very key. So make sure that the data you're presenting in your pitch deck are relevant for the market you're pitching in. Show how it really integrates well in the local environment and how it meets the national needs.
All right, so let's pause there for a moment. So
Okay.
going back, so while we're on the localized slide, we've got a question about how you'd localize it for an audience in Saudi Arabia. I mean, one thing is obviously make sure your pitch deck is not going to have imagery that's going to offend or call out, or be a focus and a distraction for your target audience. To me, one of the things is when I look at a page, a slide deck, each page, your brain is looking for every data point on the page to assign meaning to it. So you have to be really careful that there's nothing on a page that isn't distracting you. If you've got a lifestyle photo of someone on a beach with the mobile phone, you're thinking it's cold in London today, I want to be on that beach. Or you've got partner logos, and the person, you're proud to put partner logos, but the person's going, I know the people at this university, I'm going to go call them to see if they've really partnered, or no, that's probably almost certainly not because I know how they partner. So make sure that every element on your page is adding to things rather than subtracting. And so, with localizing to an American or a Saudi investor, make sure if you can, maybe things are, some examples are in a local currency, maybe make sure the imagery is going to be in sync with what that person is looking for. And of course, try to find examples that might be relevant to them, because if you're talking about London housing crisis and the person is in London, great, they can understand it. If they're not in London, you're going to have to do a lot more background explanation to why this problem, which isn't important to them and they don't understand, might be important to others. And you may need to explain the market size and so on. But on the localization, any particular thoughts with, let's say, a Saudi investor, Delphine?
I guess I agree with you. It will probably go with the images you would use. So just make sure, for example, women have a veil, also quite important. Also, in a way you behave during pitches. So I'm going to speak about this later on, but the way the way you behave during the pitch, don't show the back of your shoes, for example, or these kind of things. So it's about the pitch, but also about the behavior you may have and respecting the culture.
Back of your shoes are on a Zoom call, something has gone very wrong with the call, or you're way too
On
casual.
Zoom, yeah.
But yes. Okay, now just going back to the previous slide, I love how you in fact engrossed us all in the story on storytelling. And to me, that's the most important thing with pitch decks, which is you take the person on a story. And I think, what are the tricks that Netflix uses? The first episode is there to get you to watch the second episode. And your pitch deck, and in fact your outreach, you first maybe doing a cold LinkedIn message or a cold email, or maybe there's a warm intro. Nobody's going to invest based on that. So each hook is there to get you to watch the next one. I mean, ultimately you want to get the investment, but your first hook is to get the investor to want to get on a call with you so that you can pitch. And then the pitch is going to get the investor to go, yes, I'm interested. Please send me more business information. And then the end of that is to go, great, can I send you a term sheet? So you want to bring the person along on that drama. And the first part of it is just the teaser to get you to get the investor to take the call to present. And then on the presentation, it's to get them enveloped in, this is the problem, the drama. Oh my God, this is amazing. You're fixing it. And here's the team and here's the ask. And I want in. What do I need to do next? So, you did that marvelously there, Delphine, on that story. But when you go through your pitch deck yourself and your verbal pitch, see how you can bring people along. Something is broken. It's insane. Thousands of people are wasting their time on this. I'm sure you've wasted your time. Of course, don't make assertions that the investor has done something or it's a problem for them unless you're reasonably confident it is. Otherwise, it's a problem for other people. Otherwise, you're telling them, I'm sure you hate flying, and they're going, dude, I've got my own private jet. It's just fine. So, be careful. Anyway.
No, great. And maybe just to
yeah.
connect what you just said. So for me, there are 2 points there. A pitch deck is made to, you're not selling anything. You just want to attract or raise interest so that the investor wants to know more. You're not giving out everything everything at the same time. So it's more about triggering interest. And second point, it's actually my what I'd like to jump into is about the hook. How do you attract attention? And I'm sure, again, so we were talking about movies or Netflix. Why do you want to watch a series? Is because probably you've watched the trailer. There's so many, the choice is so large. It's like pitch deck. Honestly, we've received tons of, I'm business angels myself, and you receive a lot of decks. So how do you make a difference? Well, the hook will make the difference, because if you're well connected right immediately, then that makes sense, and you want to read the deck. So the hook, is actually the first connection, the way you connect immediately, and it's how you will probably make the decision whether to read or not to read the pitch deck deeper or not. So I think it's because normally, if you've done your research on the audience, you are able to find the right hook for the person for your deck that you will send to the person. And it's a way to make people curious and to connect emotionally as well, and so that people can feel connected. Again, the other day I received a pitch deck which was intended for the SNCF, so the French Railways, and everything was in German. Seriously, well, fine, I speak German, but honestly, if you send something in German to the SNCF, not sure it's going to work, and you get so much investment. So, well, take some time on working on your images, on the languages, but also on the hook, and how you connect, how you open the door actually, so that you welcome your investor in your deck, and that can be a cultural references, a quote, a strong figure, so that we're shocked. But be careful of not making a mistake, culturally mistake, or awkward references to some news on the market. Otherwise, you're going to lose your audience. So that's the first impression you're making. And as you know, we always have one opportunity to make one impression, the first impression. So please take some time to work on this hook. And Anthony, you mentioned the verbal and verbal communication. That's something I really want to take some time on as well. There are some verbal and actually non-verbal tips to take into account when you pitch. So about the verbal, it's take the time, pitching. Your company by heart, you sleep on it, you work day and night on it, but the person discovering your pitch is, it's the first time. So take the time for the person to actually digest or get the information and digest it. And please try to avoid to always speak of my, me, I, it's we are the company, and you're talking, the person needs to be included and part of the adventure. And as I mentioned, you're not here to sell your product, you're here to convince, and you want the investor to ask for more, to know more about your company. So you're not selling, it's not a commercial commercial pitch. And I've seen too many confusion between commercial and investor pitch as well. Be careful of not being too optimistic. I'm not saying, well, don't be negative as well, but, we have, I guess it will depend on the cultures. Maybe the amazing side will work in the US, but, like pitching in France, say, we have developed an amazing app that will save the world and so on. That's not going to work. And you will lose a bit of humility, which is not always a very, very good sign. often had very little time to pitch, or your deck shouldn't be too long anyway if you send it over by email. So don't give too much detail. Again, you're here to trigger some curiosity. So give some enough relevant information, but don't go into too much detail. If you really want to share some more information, you can put some in the appendix. That can be a way of giving the information without overcharging your pitch deck.
All right, let's pause there. Let's pause there for a moment. So I've got some thoughts. So, on the optimism, it's a really interesting one because it varies by culture. And if you ever watch an American present, you're a combination of in awe at how awesome, fabulous, amazing take over the world. And then it at some point crosses over into cringeworthy, at least if you're British, in like, oh my God, this is like embarrassing. And you kind of wish that you could do some of it and hope that you don't do other parts of it. So when I see founders pitch, to me, I think most times investors work out in the first few seconds whether they're really in or not. And the rest of it is the head trying to justify what the heart already got to. So it's really important that from the get-go, you bring in the investor and they want to be part of it. And to me, there are many pages of yada yada on business and market size and so on. But I think certainly in the early stage of a company, once you're later stage, you're doing £1 million a month revenue, people look at the spreadsheet. What's the graph doing? They know you've found product market fit. They know you've got a big sales and marketing team, and they're buying in based on the traction. But in the early stage, they're buying in on you, the founder. And so your goal as the founder is to show the investor that you can not only sell them, but importantly, you can sell your target audience on your product by showing the problem it solves them. And so you want to excite without crossing over to too much of that cringe part. And you might vary that by audience. But for me, the most investable founders that I like are the ones that stop short of drinking so much of their own Kool-Aid that they're so overhyped about how fabulous they are. But just before that, they are so convincing that they're going to take over the world, reach millions in revenue, and they've got a product that people really want and love. But if they cross over that line, then it just defies credibility. When I see a pitch deck that says we're going to do £100 million a year revenue in year 3, it's like, you'd be growing faster than Twitter. This is a, top 100 company in your country, which is fantastic, but statistically unlikely. So you want to, in my view, be as effusive and outgoing and excited and showing that you're going to change the world, but stopping short, and here it's going to be different for each of your audience, stopping short of people going, that's just bullshit, I don't believe any of that at all, or coming across as a bit, too spammy. So that's, to me, the founder giving that optimism, but stopping short of being unbelievable. All right.
Okay. And some other points to take into account when you pitch, I guess, is non-verbal communications, and especially so, and that can be, that you can adapt depending on where you are, in which country you are. And I've put 4 pillars here. I'm sure there are more, but it's about the look, the gesture, the voice, and the silences. If you take, for example, so a couple of examples, American culture, the tone of voice, the way you speak can be very energetic, enthusiastic, and you will use some personal anecdotes. And the non-verbal communications, you will watch straight forward in the eyes, show that you're self-confident and that you believe actually in what you're saying, and you will have some more expressive gestures, I would say. While if you take the Chinese culture for the nonverbal, well, actually you would tend to avoid these big gestures and prefer a more discreet approach. So again, take that into account. While I don't know, if you take the French culture, well, the over optimism is not that welcome. So that would be your showing off, and it's not well perceived. And I remember the corporal where your body language is very important. I remember my former German CEO tried to adapt to the French culture, and he was always hand in the pocket. And I said, I'm sorry, but I know you're trying to adapt to our culture, but hand in the pocket is too cool. So you're actually, you're not being taken seriously, and you're the CEO. So try to find another way to, your body language is not sending the right messages. So that would be the same thing when you pitch to an investor. So I don't know, Anthony, if you want to jump in if you have any comments on this.
I do many startup sessions in the UK, so I'm quite familiar with the UK founder audience, and they're generally not shy to ask questions. Some of the questions are actually indicating kind of like deep problems in their company, which I would think were embarrassing, but people will actually ask, hey, my CTO left and I've got to fight with them and we're suing them, and what would you do? It's like, okay, I'm surprised at the question. So when I do presentations to founders in the UK, I'm often quite chatty and open to questions and expect questions from the audience. But I was briefed when I went to France, I should expect silence. Nobody's going to ask a question, partially, of course, because I'm in English and might be, English they don't feel as confident. And I did manage to tease out more, but it was much harder work in France to get the audience to interact. My Brexit jokes went really, but no, I didn't do that. Of course, you also have to be quite careful if you're making jokes. So try to do a bit of research on your audience before you dive in and deliver the same pitch as always.
Yeah, so that you're not surprised, at least that French people tend to not ask that many questions in public, but maybe more privately, and you're not so much puzzled if you do, you're expecting and you're not having anything in fact. So I agree. And you mentioned it earlier that the images you're using are very important in the pitch. Like make sure so you have the images in the right or graphs in the right language. Again, my example for the SNCF in German doesn't work at all. But also pitching in Middle East, make sure that the women have a veil or it's important that it's not just about having nice images in your deck. It's really showing that you've made the effort of making some research on your audience and you adapt what you're doing and your solution to the person you're talking to. So that's very important. Also, the colors have a different meanings depending on the countries. So make sure you adapt it in your pitch as well.
All right. And I think one last thing from me on this before we move to the next slide, which is, these days many pitches are done on Zoom like this. So, the background, the lighting, that your audio works, that there's not too much background noise. You'd be surprised that some people pitch from a cafe, or the room lighting is bad, or you can see their bed and stuff in the background. Now, some people have got small apartments, you can't help it, but you could have moved the clothes rack out the way, or the boxes, or the bicycle that's behind. I'm always amazed when there are little things you could have done to make it better. And I had a founder reach out to me thinking that their investor was a scammer. And one of the things that was off-putting is the investor was claiming to make, hundreds of thousands of pounds investments, but they were looking scruffy and they were clearly in a small apartment with mess in the background. And, that was actually probably their biggest cue that the investor was not, as they say. So if you are claiming that you're going to take over the world, yes, of course, you're 20-something still working from a small apartment. Maybe you can, you don't have an office yet, but try to set things up. There are always Zoom backgrounds, but nonetheless, make sure you can get one of those ring lights that YouTubers use for like £12 or something like that. Make sure you've got good audio. You don't need one of those giant podcaster Yeti mics, but or a Bluetooth headset. But if it presents professionally and nothing gets distraction, that is much better to let the person buy into the fact that you're going to have a successful big business. All right.
Yeah, it's also a question of respect, really, just simply. And maybe takes us to the next point on how you make business and the kind of rules to make business. There's some basic rules that you need to respect and adapt depending on the countries, like exchanging business cards. That's something. Well, I know COVID has changed many rules on that, but make sure you respect the different protocols, the different rules depending on the countries. If you go to Japan again, well, you know that business cards need to be taken with the two hands, and you need to take the time to actually read the business cards. That's something important. So if you're speaking to a Japanese investor, well, adapt to their rules. That's just basics of business. Same thing for same thing for handshake. Handshakes are different depending on the countries. So if you go, for example, in the US or Northern Europe, well, handshake will be very brief, but in some other regions of Africa or Middle East, handshake can be longer, and it shows a real will to actually create a connection, a link with a person. And the eye contact during the handshake can be different in some countries. So watching actually in the eye the person you're handshaking is a sign of honesty and trust. In some other cultures, like in Asian cultures, well, if you watch too long in the eye someone, it can be perceived as rude or a bit too challenging. So you need to adapt that as well. It's again, my point here is, okay, the pitch deck, but there's some other rules, and it's a whole environment you need to take into account. Same thing for the dressing. Again, depending on where you are, you need to adapt on how you dress, depending on the countries. And food and the way you relate to the meal. I was working for Arriva, so a subsidiary of Deutsche Bahn, and I think you have Arriva in the UK. And they wanted to come to France and convince some French investors. And actually, I was telling them, well, fine, we're going to have some meetings, but most of the business will take place at dinner. So I finally convinced them that, doing public affairs or looking for some investment also works in France a lot at the restaurants. And it's not just joking, really. So you need to adapt depending on where you are. So there's some kind of etiquette to respect, so that, just to avoid to be too awkward or again, so that's not on Zoom, but show your shoes or pointing with the fingers in China would be very rude. So think about all these cultural elements. I don't know, Anthony, if you want to jump in.
I think the one thing for me is, we've been working in Singapore, and Singapore, like Japan, is on business cards. Japan is very much, business card, both hands, read the business card. Do not casually flick the business card across the table, or when someone gives you their business card, just sort of tuck it into your pocket and go, because it's considered quite rude. And in the UK, nobody uses business cards anymore, right? It's the LinkedIn QR code photo. But when you're in Asia, be prepared to take lots of cards and, read the other person's as well.
So that was for the pitch, but if we have a bit of time, I just want to spend some time on other elements around the pitch. I'll be quite quick so that I can take some questions, but I think there's some elements to take into account, like the company or service or the app name. If we take an example of IKEA in Thailand, for example, they realized that the name of some of their products actually had the sexual connotation, so they had to change it. I know that sounds funny, it can be more serious sometimes. So make sure if you decide to go international that it actually works anywhere, or make sure you make the right adjustments for the market you want to expand to. The visual identity is important and needs to be adapted. So the logos, the colors, for example, UPS in Spain, the brown lorries for UPS. Well, this is for, it's like hearses, so corbillard for the French people, because I had to look up for the word, hearses in Spain. So it was not that well perceived or received on the Spanish market. Or Puma in United, how we say, Arabic Emirates. They wanted to do a special special shoes for their 40th anniversary, and they actually put the flag on the shoes, but they didn't take into account the fact that, well, the shoes is a sign of impurity in this country, and so the whole market, I mean, it didn't work because people were so shocked by the fact that they put a flag on the shoe, on the shoe. So again, it's a wrong adaptation, a wrong information, no research on the market. So this is why it's very important to adapt your product depending on the target country. Like, Uber did. Uber in India, they realized that people were paying a lot in cash, so they actually amended the application so the people had the possibility to pay the drivers in cash. And I think it's always a good sign for the investors to show that you've made the effort of adapting your product, your app, or your service for the market you're targeting to. Make sure you adapt your tone of voice and the messages. I remember when I was working for Trainline or Captain Train at the beginning, we had actually local people, native people, writing to Italian markets, Spanish markets, German markets, and so on, so that we were sure we had the right tone of voice, the right cultural references, and we were well aligned with the expectations of our clients in each country. And this cultural references is very important. I think it's sometimes, a bit too much forgotten. So it's a bit beyond the page, but I thought it was important to make a quick focus on that. So that's about it, really. I think it's very hard because there are so many elements to take into account, but I hope it answers some expectations and questions.
All right, so thank you. So actually, that leads very nicely to the next question we've got in the chat, which is, can we say something about the Q&A part of the pitch? And that's really important. So let's say that, you've got a 10-minute or a 5-minute slot in front of a big audience. There probably won't be time for Q&A, or maybe there is. But when you have, let's say, a half-hour slot with an investor on a Zoom call or a meeting, there are two possibilities. One of them is you talk at them for the full half hour and then leave. Or two, you take the pitch deck part of it in the presentation. It's just like 10 minutes to show you what we're doing, and the rest of it is going to be the discussion. And actually, that in many ways is a much better way of doing it. You're going to start with a little bit of foreplay, so to speak, where you introduce yourselves, not so much that the investor is going to be thinking, dude, when are you going to get to the pitch part? Because I think you have to signal, we're going to speak, about the weather and stuff for like 2 minutes, and then I'm going to get on with the pitch. But you really want to leave a lot of time afterwards for the questions, because that's going to be the bit where you understand really what the concerns of the investor, what's driving the investor, what are the next steps. And the other thing is, if you just keep talking at them, it's a broadcast. You get no feedback en route, really. So a couple of things, and then I'm going to hand over to you. The other interesting thing for me is when you do a presentation, obviously, if you're doing it to a packed room, it's just a broadcast. But when you're doing it to an investor, there are different ways of doing it. One of them is, I'm going to speak at you for the next 10 minutes. And the other one is, we're going to make this interactive. And then the problem is the investor may take you on a completely different journey, and now you've completely screwed up your presentation. Or you decide to not go with the pitch deck flow. You've carefully put the team section at the end of the deck. And you start by going, hey, I'm Bob, and this is Alice, and let's tell you. And now you go, shit, I've completely screwed up my presentation format. So you learn this after a little while. My take is, if you come up with a deck flow, try and stick with that. If the investor's going off on a tangent, you don't want to not answer their questions so they think that you're being evasive. If they ask you about the product testing and you go, I'm just going to move right on, that's bad. But do try to, you put this work into a flow. And if you deviate from the flow, then you're going to be stuck, and your slides are not going to match, and you're going to go, wait, I need to go back here, and the whole thing's going to be a bit of a shambles. So thoughts on how you control the flow, Delphine, and how you don't just talk at the audience, but you make it just the right level of interactive.
Yeah, and how, we were talking about storytelling, is how do you include, the audience, the investor in your story. So I guess it's, don't take too many questions during your pitch, otherwise you're going to break your storytelling. But you can take one question and include this and say, or maybe just take it and say, I get your point, we'll answer it later in the pitch, and then make some references once you get to the point to the question the investor actually asked. So that can be a clever way. But I guess if you start taking all the questions, you're not going to have the 10 minutes and you won't be able to give all the information you want. And also, it's good to take some feedbacks in the end, because the more questions you get, the better it helps you to actually adapt your pitch deck as well. And honestly, how many startups, CEOs have told me, well, I've done my pitch decks 100 times, but because you learn from the feedbacks and questions you get. And just maybe to answer one question about the differences between top line, medium, or the pitches. I think depending on where you are in the development of your company, well, first, I guess if you're starting, show there's some start of traction. And make sure you show that you have the right basis, or the people helping you, maybe the right advisors as well. Maybe you don't have any clients yet, but you have the right networks, or you have the right experience as well. Well, if you're more developed, well, that would be easier to show that you've got the growth, traction, and so on. But you need to find some tricks, even though you're just starting.
Okay, so a couple of points. Firstly, about controlling the narrative. I think a really interesting point you raised, which is you're on slide 2, and the investor starts asking you about traction, and that's on slide 8. What do you do? And I think what you should do is you go, that's brilliant. You're a mind reader. Actually, I have that a couple of slides later, so let me get back to that later. And then, of course, when you do get to slide 8, you go and get back to their question. Some investors are quite difficult and some are quite easy. Some might want to insist on it, so don't override it, but gently guide it to, we're going to get to that, you'll see the data coming up shortly, so let me just continue and we'll get there. So I think that was it. So on the when you do a pitch, sometimes you get an opportunity for a 1-minute pitch, sometimes there's 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and so on, and you're going to focus on different things. This is the top line, medium, or deep dive. If you've got a minute, you're just selling the dream. If you are 3 minutes, you're selling the dream, the execution, and the traction, and essentially in maybe 3 or 4 slides, that's all you've got. It's super important when I see people pitching, particularly in person, they're often looking at the slides behind. Do not look at the slides, memorize the slides. Those CIA movies where they've put the gun up, take it apart and put it together in the dark, blindfolded. You should know your slide deck just like that. So, sometimes you'll see a monitor in front of you if you're doing a big presentation, and you can see your slide deck. Sometimes you might just know from the corner of your eye what it is. Sometimes, you sometimes have to glance to make sure the clicker works, but you should never have prompt notes in front of you, and you should never be talking at the screen. You always want to talk at the audience. And of course, the problem is if you're doing that, sometimes you just lose track of where you are. And so the top tip I heard is keep in mind 3 messages that you want to get across in any presentation. It might be what's the problem we solve, what's the team, and how far we're up, or some upcoming, 3 things that you're definitely not going to forget. And then if you get stuck in the presentation, or the video doesn't work. Too often you go to a physical event to present and there's a problem. Your MacBook doesn't have HDMI and they've only got an HDMI cable, or the Wi-Fi doesn't work, or the projector's down. And those founders who hop on stage go, not a problem, I'm just going to wing it. They win the evening. The ones that are sitting there going, I'm lost completely, that's bad. So, memorize it, keep in mind a few points in case you forget everything else, and make sure that you can present even without the comfort of the slides behind you. So, my anecdote there was my definitely most way out presentation, elevator pitch, I should say, was years ago when I was with the BBC. I was at IBC, a big broadcast trade conference in Amsterdam. And after the show ends, everyone goes out for a walk around Amsterdam. And I was literally walking at 2 a.m. in the red light district with some executives from a huge US media organization. And they said, I was working on a startup. Pitch your startup, and as we were walking past the red light district at 2 a.m. after some drinks, I went, at the end of which he said, that was actually quite a good pitch. So I figured if I can pitch at 2 a.m. in the red light district, got it sorted. All right. Yeah. So the last question then, which is on investor outreach. So this is super important. Everyone tells you, get a warm intro to investors, which is always very nice if you can get a warm intro. But what if you can't get a warm intro? You're desperate to find investors. There are zillions of them out there. How are you going to contact them? So some investors insist on warm intros. Some insist that you go to the website and fill in the form. Other ones would like a warm intro, but if you reach out to them directly, they're going to take your call. And they're going to follow up. And how are you going to increase your chance of getting a follow-up? You're going to have a personalized outreach. So, every day I get tons of incomings from recruiters and others going, hey, your website SEO could be improved. We're here to help. And you haven't even reached the end of the sentence before you've deleted the email. But if someone reaches out to me and goes, hey, Anthony, I watched one of your videos from 2018 where you said X, and I've been thinking about it since then. I wanted to follow up on that. You're going to have to think carefully. These days, it could be AI generated, or it could be somebody with really good LinkedIn outreach skills. But because the person's put the effort in, you're going to respond. So 2 tips for investor outreach. Number 1, look up something about the investor first. Do your research. Which other company did they invest in? Have they done a blog post? Have they done LinkedIn posts on things that are interesting? And then when you reach out to them, you're not pitching the investment. That comes later. You're pitching to tell them more about something. So, hey, I saw you invested in company X, or, you wrote a blog post. I really liked your blog post on X. And actually, the mission that we're on aligns with that. Here's the URL. I'd love to tell you more. We're fundraising, would be, I think, something that would get me to respond. The other trick that I've learned is that when you look up the investor on LinkedIn, it will tell you the mutual contacts you've got. So don't feel shy to reach out to the mutual contacts to ask them to do an intro. And people sometimes reach out to me. And then, of course, the problem on LinkedIn, some people I've connected with in 2012 and never spoken to them since. And so I'll go look it up because everyone, generally wants to be nice. And if I have recently corresponded with this person, I might go, yes, I'm delighted. Send me a few lines and I'll do an intro. If you haven't, it's sorry, I last spoke to them 10 years ago. That's going to be weird. I can't do. But leverage everything you can to try and do those cold outreaches, or get somebody else who is connected to do that for you. All right. Delphine, any last final wrap-up words on your side?
I think the conclusion would be just make a connection to the person you're talking to. That's the main point. That works for pitch, that works for PR when you speak with journalists, that works in any context really. So just make the effort of gathering some information that is relevant for the person you're talking to. That would be it. But if some people say we haven't had the time to go through a couple of decks, but if you want to share or send me a deck and want some feedback, I'll be happy to take some time and send you some feedback on your pitch deck.
All right, amazing. And where should people send it? Potentially connect with you on LinkedIn first. Where do they find you on LinkedIn? Delphine,
on LinkedIn,
Margot?
on the WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I'm on WhatsApp as well, so I can again send a message right after this session so that you have my contact details.
Amazing. All right. And you can reach me, Anthony Rose, on LinkedIn or anthony@seedlegals.com. If you're doing your funding round and you're in Ireland or France or the UK, love to help you there. And I've also posted in the chat some AI pitch deck checking services, worth giving them a shout and a try, and let me know. Ping me on LinkedIn if they were any good or not. I'd be quite interested to see. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope this was helpful. Good luck on your next pitch and pitch deck. Thanks
Yeah,
all.
thank you, everyone. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.